Startupfest and CannabisFest. I'm very excited that Larry thought of us to share a little bit of data. I like to say I'm going to talk data to you today. How did I get into this? I'm a masochist, apparently. It was really sort of accidental. I'm a financial analyst by training. I got a finance and trade degree undergrad and ended up working for a bank in New York, as many of my peers did. 9/11 happened, and my office kind of shut down. I won't go into details. I don't want to be morbid, but I decided no more of that, and I went into intelligence. Moved to DC, got my master's, and did that for another 4 years. Again, masochism. But about after 8 years of my career, I found myself sort of at a loss of what to do. And I decided, you know what, I'm in the US, I'm a naturalized American. I'm like, I'm gonna try the entrepreneurial journey. And so I dug my toes, really just my little peeky toe, to see how I would fare. This was 2008, and I launched a company called Giadha International that had a solution called Auto Speed Check. Auto Speed Check was a technology-based solution that ingested information in real time and turned it into a risk indicator. Not to have your eyes glaze over, is better known as progressive snapshot. 2008, we all know what happened in most of, definitely in the US, there was a big crash. So didn't really do so well, but I did get my entrepreneurial stripes as a female and a minority who apparently could do tech. Fast forward 7 years. I mean, 7 long years. I was running a consulting firm by that time. The other company was done. And because I speak languages, I was helping US company go into the BRIC nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China. Again, primarily tech solutions, new product development from the US into other countries. We're in DC, and someone called me from Maryland and said, hey, I have another emerging market that I need your help with. I'm like, okay. And like, pot. I'm like, what? How does that have to do with technology? And so I said, listen, Maryland is about to put out licenses where, you know, there's actually legalization of cannabis across the United States and North America. News to me. Like, can you assess the risks and opportunities of this market, which is what I do. We did. Within 3 weeks of due diligence and research, looking at the entire globe as far as data and reporting, we couldn't find one viable industry report that we could do any analysis on. We went on to look for academic research. Again, nothing. Figured, okay, there's no research, there's no reporting. There's got to be data somewhere so we can do our own research. Nothing. Realized quickly that the reason why there wasn't anything viable for this emerging market is because there was no centralized repository of data that you could utilize to then analyze. I'm a poet, I don't even know it. So the light bulb went on again. It took me another 12 years to come up with an idea. I'm like, holy moly, I'm from technology that helps ingest information, and I'm an analyst. There's a huge opportunity here to solve a massive problem, which was the information gap in cannabis. And in May of 2014, New Frontier Data was born, and that's my story. So, segue, thank you. So, and this is a good segue to sort of give you a little bit, and then I hope you don't mind, I'm gonna, oh, I have one there, I don't have to cheat. I'm gonna give you a little overview at what do we do at New Frontier Data, but I'm also gonna try to, without getting into the weeds, yes, I used the pun, of the data itself, which will literally put you to sleep. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give you some substantiated trends that hopefully will paint a picture for you of what are the opportunities and what are the risks in cannabis in not only North America, but across the globe today. So let's jump right in. Global phenomena. What does that mean? What that means is that there are over 50 countries around the world that are either decriminalizing or legalized cannabis and or hemp today. When I started in 2014, there were 8 states in Canada. Let me repeat that. Today it's over 50. I believe we're getting close to over 60 all over the world. Africa actually has a few more green dots as of today. One would not think Africa, but yes, even in Africa. So it is relevant. It is a relevant sector, and it's a sector that is considered one of the fastest growing industries globally today. How do we help? What is New Frontier Data is? And I promise you, I'm not here to pitch you. I'm just going to give you some context. Our mission is really to elevate the discussion around this plant because it is a serious industry and it is serious business. We're objective. We absolutely do not take part in the legalization movement. We just report what the facts say. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, and sometimes it's ugly. But we take a lot of pride in reporting things comprehensively and objectively. Our vision, not a nonprofit, we do want to be the big data central repository globally for all things cannabis, which means we need to partner with everyone and we need to work with everyone. How do we do that? Well, one of the biggest challenges that we face early on, and I mentioned that this is a technology company, is, well, there were 8 states in the United States. Only Colorado at the time was looking to move into adult use. And every state has their own reporting mechanisms, and every state had their own data. Hell, to this day, every state has their own straining naming protocols. So how do we centralize and sort of ingest this information and make sure that we make sense out of it? As a 20-plus year analyst, we had to sort of throw away all the traditional modeling and Excel sheets type of examples. We had to come up with a new model. And so we came up with this. We call it the 5-dimensional model. We look at qualitative and quantitative data. And so we look at anything from federal to state regulation to consumer behavior to supply and ancillary services. And we ingest information around those 5 segments in any market that we cover, which right now, candidly, is most of the cannabis world, and then come up with, as I said, objective findings for our clients. Now let me dive into what's happening in North America, where Canada is extremely important, which I'm assuming is why you're here today. First and foremost, one of the interesting things to note is that between 2018 and 2025, the US and the Canadian market will add up to $173 billion. It may not seem that large, but it is actually quite significant. That is a lot of job creation or a lot of revenue generation for 2 nations in a small amount of time. Other interesting factoid. When you look at growth between 2016 and 2025 when it comes to the Canadian market, even though adult use just came to be, and even though Canada has been medical since inception, adult use revenue generation is supposed to absolutely overtake medical. Now, we're only looking at 2016 to 2025. And mind you that, of course, when we model this information, we looked at other industries and other markets like those that have matured or are evolving in the United States. That does not mean that that trend will continue on. Because I have to speak facts, I can only show you up to 2025. But we are beginning to see potential, we're starting to get a feel that it may be that past 2025, medical may come back up, and that really will have a lot to do with science and research, and whether especially in the U.S., whether we're going to go pharmaceutical, nutraceutical, and some other factors. But for the time being in Canada, we're expecting to see a massive growth going for between 2016 and 2025, where adult use itself is going to go from 0.4 billion, which is expected this year, versus 1 billion in medical, to 4.3 billion. Versus 1.8 billion in medical. So massive growth. The US, as I mentioned earlier, the US and Canadian market are quite, they're doing very well, and they're going to be very fruitful. When you look at 2016 to 2025, we're looking at a total market that goes from 7 billion to 30 billion combined. And as you can see, actually the next slide, and what's interesting to note is even when you look at investment flow, and there has been quite a rise in investment, in fact, from 1.8 billion in 2016 to 5 billion in 2017, a combined amount of $8 billion in investment, both private and public. And what we can see there is that Canada overall has almost half of the entire investment flow. So again, these 2 countries are absolutely leading the way in the cannabis market movement, let's call it, globally. A little bit about risks and opportunities, since I understand that we have a room that's sort of primarily of folks that are interested in learning more and understanding how to navigate or conquering the wild, as I like to say, because that's kind of one of our slogans. where do the opportunities lie? When we look at the type of new companies that are emerging, primarily across North America, but mind you, also a lot over Europe and even Latin America today, there are 5 main sectors where we see the most innovation, as well as funding into, which means these are companies that should fare well. Cultivation tech. I actually had the honor to recently publish an article in Forbes Tech, and the whole article was about what is the innovation that is stemming from this, you know, sort of industry that still has a little bit of a scarlet letter around it, and yet that is literally stemming innovation that is being applied now not only in cannabis, but it is applied in mature agriculture. So cultivation technology is one of those. Oil extraction. So the process of taking the plant and turn it into oils and others so that you can have infused products. A lot of innovation in that sector. Any kind of tech-based solution when it comes to managing anywhere from the plant growth to ancillary services. Total plug there, Equio is our portal where we provide business intelligence. So a lot of tech-based solutions emerging. Consumer devices, of course. So all the vape pens, all of those things. I mean, there's some serious plethora of new consumer products that are emerging from this industry. But not everything is rosy. There are also some serious risks associated with this emerging market, as is usually the case. And I'm going to go briefly through them. Oversupply. We actually predicted this in 2015 in Oregon, when there is a complete misalignment between supply and demand. And part of it is due to the fact that this industry started a little less sophisticated because it was born of a movement, at least in the United States. So there's still a little bit of information gap. I want to say a little bit, I'm being diplomatic. So oversupply is still a risk, and that has a trickling effect. We saw some dramatic drops in wholesale pricing, over 70% in some states. That's a significant economic factor when you look at the overall industry. Competition. Needless to say, this is a hot market, not just locally, but globally now. So there is a lot of competition from folks going into the industry, but also folks from mature ancillary segments, tobacco, pharma, alcohol, media, branding, marketing that are coming in as well, bringing deep pockets and bringing quite a bit of savoir-faire. I mentioned the global element, funding. At least in the United States, more so than here in Canada. But in the United States, as I'm sure you all know, there's still a banking issue. It is not federally legal. So funding remains primarily driven by the private markets, and there's quite a bit of limitations because there's premiums, et cetera, that are associated with higher risk. So funding is still a risk in this space, obviously less so in Canada. And then last but not least, marketing. And again, I think that's more so true in the United States than in Canada because it's federally legal. In the United States, you can't exempt a lot of the marketing costs and others. That said, even in Canada and across the globe, given the fact that it is a psychotropic drug, there are some limitations around how you can market your product. And that sort of wraps up what I wanted to provide really quickly, as I said, macro level, sort of paint a picture of where the industry is today as far as North America. The big takeaway here is Canada and the United States are absolutely leading the way globally. Canada is in a unique position because as it is nationally legal, both for medical and adult use, what's happening is Canada is also uniquely positioned to enter other markets through exports, which others are trying to do, but Canada is doing better. So with that, I leave you. We did want to offer something because we're all about information and sharing. If you ever are interested in more depth information, I promise your eyes won't glaze over. We'll try to keep it short. We do have a report on Canada, and if you use that code, I believe that you're going to get a special discount for a couple of days. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Giadha.